Well, we talked to a lot of the people involved in that saga. A lot of the people from SARS who subsequently got fired by Tom Moyani, and others who had insights, and their uh, belief, some of it based on evidence, some of it speculative, is that the State Security Agency was doing Jacob Zuma's bidding at the time. Pravin Gordhan became a obstacle to his state capture objectives, and so they resurrected or invented this state capture. This rogue unit allegation, and it's they found a very handy vehicle in the Sunday Times investigative unit, which appears not to have bothered to verify this sort of documentation, that they ran with stories that they didn't get, they weren't actually able to substantiate. And these stories were just coming week after week after week and becoming increasingly bizarre. I mean, they alleged that the so-called rogue unit was running a brothel with no evidence. And to this day, no one's ever been able to say, where was it located, who was it staffed by, and the like. So that's where it came from. It was designed to discredit Gordhan and give Moyani the power to get rid of the likes of Ivan Pillay and Johan van Lochrenberg and other people who were doing a very good job in SARS at the time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but a person like Hofstadter, he was at a book launch, and one of the people that was actually fired in this process confronted him. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, I've just forgotten his name. Jono, do you remember?
Pete Richer.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So Stefan Hofstadter launched a book ironically about state capture at a place called Love Books in Johannesburg. And there were people there who were protesting against the coverage that the Sunday Times had done. And he seemed to be quite dismissive of it. But then Peter Richer stood up, and Peter Richer was one of the people who'd been badly damaged and effectively lost his job because of the Sunday Times' coverage. And he stood up and detailed how the Sunday Times had got it so terribly wrong. And I think, to Hofstadter's credit, he subsequently apologized and kind of distanced himself from that. But the other guys in that unit, I mean, are still trying to sell the rogue unit story, in spite of the fact that it's been sort of discredited very, very thoroughly.
Yeah, there's footage of that incident on, at Love Books on. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube if you Google it, and it's very, very powerful. Watching Pete Richer get up and pointing his finger at Hofstadter and saying, this is what you have done. This is how you've destroyed people's lives, and it kind of summed up the devastation that these journalists, or kind of so-called journalists, really did.
That's interesting. I'm definitely going to check that out. I didn't know that. I'm just definitely going to check that out after that on YouTube. Jonathan, so Pravin Gordhan, he was confronted with this apparent damning evidence, and he went to President Zuma, and can you tell us that story of how he confronted President Zuma? Where does this come from? Why are you targeting me?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has in its history, where the Guptas had tried to have Des van Rooyen appointed as the finance minister after that whole Nkandla Nene incident where Nene was unceremoniously fired. And that's when the bottom fell out of the country. And then in order for sort of Zuma to, there was a lot of pressure then put on Zuma to bring Gordhan back. So Gordhan then replaced Van Rooyen. And so it was a few months later, and that's when it was full-out war between Zuma and Gordhan. Even though he had appointed him as Minister of Finance to replace Van Rooyen, these two men were at war. And so it was just, I think it was in February. So this would have happened, I think, in December. And then a few months later, or November, December, a few months later, Gordhan was putting the final touches to his budget speech when an envelope was hand delivered to the Treasury. And he opened it up, and there were these 27 questions from the Hawk relating to this kind of so-called rogue unit. And the Hawks gave Gordhan 2 weeks to answer these questions. And it was maybe just coincidence that they had arrived, these questions had arrived soon after the Gupta's looting project was at risk. So Gordhan then went directly to Zuma, and he took these 27 questions with him, and he said, and he gave it to Zuma, and he said, what's going on? And he said to him, you know, he had survived, Gordhan had survived the security police in the apartheid era, and now Zuma was wanting to have him killed under democracy. And Gordhan told us that Zuma flipped through the pages without reading the questions, but just flipping through the pages and saying he was going to check it out. He was going to check it out. So he couldn't answer him directly. He couldn't confront Gordhan because Zuma doesn't like to confront people directly. He does it at the stroke of midnight. When people are asleep, he makes an announcement.
So do you think he knew that President Zuma was behind this? Is that why he confronted him?
Yes, I think he knew. I mean, he had been under attack from that moment. In fact, he after his first stint as finance minister, when he was sort of demoted to Cogta, he knew that he had run foul of Zuma. But when he was reappointed as finance minister, I think the phrase that he used was that the gloves had come off, and he knew then that this was a collision course waiting to happen. And it was quite clear that the ministers in the cabinet who were supporting Zuma were targeting him. It was a very rough year. He only had that position for a year before he was then eventually fired. Quite dramatically, he was recalled from an invested roadshow to where he was in the UK. But it was a hell of a year where he was just batting away charges and kind of missiles that were being launched at him. We kind of forget about that year, but it was a very, very, we were on a slippery slope and we were sort of tumbling down.